From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Free Expression with Gerry Baker.
Hello and welcome to the Free Expression podcast from the Wall Street Journal. I'm Gerry Baker, editor-at-large of the Journal. If you're not already subscribing to Free Expression, please sign up wherever you do your podcast listening. This week, Republicans buoyant. This week, I've been at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, where I think the mood can best be described as something close to euphoric. Now, I've been attending GOP conventions for more than 20 years, and I can't recall a more positive atmosphere among Republican delegates. It's no exaggeration, in fact, to say that for many, it's almost as though there's a sense of destiny here, perhaps even divine providence they're talking about, propelling them towards November's election. The failed attempt on Donald Trump's life last weekend, when the former president seemed to survive a would-be assassin's bullet by a matter of millimeters, is viewed by many as providential and a sign of coming victory. But to that we must add, of course, in recent weeks, the melting away of most of the legal actions against Trump, the slow-motion collapse of Joe Biden's re-election effort, as more and more Democrats call on him to drop out, an apparently steady and robust lead for Trump in the opinion polls. The selection of Senator J.D. Vance as Trump's vice presidential pick has also gone down well with the delegates here, seen by most as a signal of the party's long-term conversion to a populist agenda that's in tune with the GOP's new political base. So is it all as rosy as it looks for the Republicans, as Trump and Vance leave Milwaukee for the campaign trail? Well, this week I'm pleased to say I'm joined by Steve Scalise, Republican House Majority Leader and Congressman from Louisiana. Scalise not only, of course, has been a significant leader at the top of the Republican Party for some time, but he survived an assassination attempt himself in 2017 when a gunman shot up the congressional baseball game. Scalise, of course, returned to frontline politics a few months later. I'm glad to say that Steve Scalise joins me now. Leader Scalise, thanks very much for joining Free Expression.
It's great to be with you. Appreciate you having me.
Congressman, I've been coming to Republican conventions for at least 20 years. I can't recall a convention where the mood was more buoyant, stronger sense of possibility and opportunity. Seems like things have gone extremely well. What's your view?
Yeah, no, I've been sharing that exact sentiment with so many my friends, my colleagues that are up here from all around the country. And, you know, I go back to the 1988 convention in New Orleans. I was a volunteer back in that convention. I've been to many others. The unity is something I've never seen before, the positive attitude. And maybe Saturday changed things, you know, with the shooting to kind of put a different focus even more. But leading into that, I think there was already starting to be this crystallization of, you know, we have to come together if we're going to get our country back. And now I think President Trump has full command of the party going into the November election. And with the ticket complete, you know, I think, you know, the mood on the floor was really, really positive last night towards J.D. Vance. And so I think that helps get this ticket ready to go. They're going to be on the road. There's a lot of work because there are a lot of states in play now, states that weren't in play even a week ago. And so I think it shows that this ticket is really appealing to a lot of people around the country. President Trump has shown a different side of himself. I hope tonight he shows an even more kind of renewed side of himself that brings more people into this growing tent.
Let me ask you a personal question, if I may, Congressman. You, of course, survived yourself an assassination attempt in 2017 at the congressional baseball game shooting. Mercifully, thank God you survived that, and you're doing very well. As you see Donald Trump here at the convention, as you say, we're recording this on Thursday, so we record ahead of his speech Thursday night. I wonder whether you have any reflections on how an episode like that changes someone, changes the way they think about their role, changes the way they think about their sense of purpose. What effect did it have on you, and do you see any of that, perhaps, in anything that you're seeing in Donald Trump at the moment?
Yeah, you know, for me, I mean, it was such an experience. It's life-changing because you almost lose your life, and to come that close. You know, as I came in my shooting incident in 2017 and as President Trump came, I mean, as we all know, within centimeters of his life, it really does make you reflect. And for me, the reflection was what really is important in life. And, you know, and all these things that you do in your life, I've got an incredible job. I mean, I represent 750,000 people in Southeast Louisiana. At the time of the shooting, I was the majority whip. Now I'm the majority leader. These are great, important jobs. But what's most important to me was my family. And that's what really, I think, came to light to me is like, I need to make sure that's front and center more than anything. And, you know, I still do my job and love it, but just remind you what's important in life. And I think for President Trump, I was with him Tuesday night and, you know, we texted back and forth Saturday right after the shooting, but I saw almost a different focus on him. And, you know, I don't know yet because it probably takes a little while, but I think you're already seeing a little bit of that same focus too, that here's a man who is warm, compassionate, and it's a side of him that most people don't see, but he loves his family. He is a man who cares so much about his kids, his grandkids. And I was so glad that Donald Trump Jr. not only spoke, but brought up his daughter to talk about her grandfather. And I think the more they humanize Donald like that, Melania Trump's letter Sunday after the shooting, I thought was so poignant because it did the same thing. And it said, look, many people don't know my husband, but he's not this caricature that the media might make him out to be. He's a person. And if he shows that more, I hope he shows that tonight, because I think that's a side of him that America would love to see and doesn't see enough. But I think they're going to, because I see it in him right now that in ways I didn't see even a week ago.
I think it changes the way people think about Donald Trump. I mean, he is, look, we're going to talk about the Republican Party, obviously, in the way he's united the Republican Party, but he still is a polarizing figure for a lot of people who really, we know what Democrats and many independents think of him. Do you think this may change the way people view, or will he still be this kind of polarizing figure for many Americans?
I think it will, and I hope it does, because in so many ways, the polarization of Donald Trump is created by the media who hates him. And there are elements of the media still to this day, you see it. There are people saying they wish the shooter didn't miss. I mean, that's disgusting. It's beyond vile, but you're still seeing some of that. And it shows you there's just pure hatred, and it's a shame. There should be none of that. You disagree with people politically, that's what America's about. But to go after them personally is not fair game. It's not something that we should accept. And I hope that comes out of what happened Saturday, that we do need to change that focus and tone. But you still see some people that don't want to give it up. But at the end of the day, why do they hate him? And I think that's something you need to look in the mirror. If somebody really does hate Donald Trump, they need to look in the mirror and answer the question, why? Here's a man who wakes up every day and has risked everything. And he was wealthy before he ran for president. He had a great family before he ran. He ran to make life better for other people. And he delivered on so many of those things when he was president. I worked with him on so many of those things. Y'all covered so much of that. What we did on tax and regulation policy to give people, working people, a real opportunity again that they didn't have. We were losing great companies in America, great jobs in America, going overseas. And Donald Trump fought to bring that back and give people opportunity. And that's what he cares about. He cares about those Gold Star families, the moms and dads who lost their kids in service to our country in ways that President Biden doesn't even care about. And that's the kind of Donald Trump that a lot of us see. And maybe if more people saw that, they would drop some of that hatred and just pure anger and maybe look at him a different way. I hope he gets a second look by a lot of those Americans, because if they do, they're going to love the man that I know, because he's a man who loves this country and he's delivered before for this country. And we need somebody who's going to go fight for this country again.
But to be fair, there are also a lot of people who are not full of hate and not driven by the media who still have their doubts about Donald Trump, because largely, I think, because of what happened after the election last time or what happened on January 6th. And in fact, they regard him, again, we want to tone down the level of hostility and the conversation here. But, there are people who aren't at this convention. Republicans, Congressman, his own vice president in his first term is not here, refuses to support him because of what happened on January 6th. And other leading members of the Republican Party have also declined to support him. It's not just kind of media-driven hatred, is it? There's been legitimate concerns among many Republicans themselves, again, largely because of what happened on January the 6th and the lead-up to it, that maybe he can't be trusted as a Democratic leader.
Well, and look, like I said, with any political figure, there are going to be people that agree with you and disagree with you because of positions you've taken. That's fair game. It's the visceral hatred for no justified reason, because, they were told that this guy's evil. They were told that this guy's compared to Hitler. I mean, those comparisons are still out there. That to me is disgusting. It always has been. And it's always been inaccurate, by the way. But that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Yeah, any president, I'm sure even Ronald Reagan had Republicans that didn't support him. Donald Trump, if you look over the last 2 months, has had Republicans that surely didn't support him in the primaries that are coming on board now. I thought it was a big move on Donald Trump's part to invite Nikki Haley to come speak, and I thought she was well received. I thought her message was really important. Ron DeSantis being on that stage as well. And look, you could have said 2 weeks ago that those camps of the Republican Party were not yet supportive of Donald Trump. I think that's coalescing right now, too. And so as we get closer to not just November 5th, but because so many states vote early, by September, you're going to have a lot of states where people in the thousands and more are going to be going to the polls or going to their, ballot boxes and their mailboxes and voting. So I think you're seeing that coalescing around Donald Trump happening now. And by the way, he's the one doing it. Donald Trump's the one who reached out to Nikki Haley. That was, maybe 4 years ago that he might not have done something like that. And so I think that's important that he's doing this, and it's a different side of him.
Do you think he needs to do more tonight, Thursday night, or on the campaign trail in the next few months to explicitly to allay those concerns that some people still have? Again, people in your own party, like Mike Pence, like former President George W. Bush, who's not here, like former House Speaker Paul Ryan, that actually can be trusted. Does he need to do more to, as you say, he has brought other Republicans who are hostile to him in the primary on board, but does he need to do more to bring more independent voters and to allay the concerns that so many people maybe still have about him?
Well, he has been doing that. And I think this is one part of this growing tent I'm talking about. We have a big tent philosophy already, but we've actually been delivering on it. We've been reaching out into communities. And Donald Trump, when you saw him go to Brooklyn, and this is before the shooting, he went to Brooklyn, which a lot of people would have said, why are you going to waste your time there? Go to Michigan, go to Pennsylvania again, or Nevada, which has become a swing state, Virginia. He had Glenn Youngkin sitting next to him yesterday. And so if you look at some of the people that maybe weren't with him before, I think more of them have an opportunity to come on board on the Republican side. But most of them are already there, by the way. But what he's really done that's been remarkable is that President Trump has reached out and appealed to so many independents, so many Hispanic voters, so many black voters. And I'm talking about people that used to vote Democrat 96% of the time. Now you're seeing amongst black voters, over 20% of the black vote is going to Donald Trump because he's really appealing to them and putting a message out, talking about opportunity in ways that they're not getting from Joe Biden right now. And I think that's one of the reasons the Democrat Party is in disarray. You want to talk about who's in disarray? Donald Trump has brought almost everybody into the tent that was in this tent in 2020 and in 2016, but he's grown it. The Democrat Party is imploding before our very eyes to the point where, even yesterday, Chuck Schumer is trying to delay the convention because they want to dump their own candidate. By the way, the people that lecture all of us on democracy, the Democrats, are trying to dump the guy, Joe Biden, who was elected by 14 million Democrats in a primary just a few months ago. And there was nothing different about Joe Biden a few months ago that you saw in that debate stage a few weeks ago. So this idea that, wow, Joe Biden just changed the night of the debate is a lie. Everybody who knows Joe Biden knows in February, it was the exact same Joe Biden that you saw Donald Trump just destroy on the debate stage. It wasn't just that Joe Biden imploded. It was that Donald Trump did so well in that debate. But now they want to dump their candidate who was democratically elected by their own voters. And Joe Biden's not giving that up. And he's going to go into Chicago as their nominee, but in an incredibly divided party. What you're seeing here is an incredibly united Republican Party.
Just a quick question on the assassination attempt, Congressman. There's been a lot of concern expressed about the security lapses that day. I know you've been involved in some of the conversations, some of the briefings you've had. What's your sense? Do you think that the head of the Secret Service needs to be held accountable? Should she resign? What went wrong? What's your impression so far of just exactly what did go wrong?
Yeah, I've been incredibly disappointed in the lack of candor from the head of the Secret Service in anything like this. Government needs to be transparent with the people. Everybody in America watched this in horror, but then they immediately start having questions. How does a shooter 140 yards away from the stage get access to the rooftop? Inside or outside the perimeter, it was clearly monitored and was noted as a place where something bad could happen, but it wasn't watched. Did they farm it out? Who really knows what happened? We haven't gotten those answers. We shouldn't be asking those questions this long after the shooting. And the Secret Service director's been, I think, so out of touch and out of focus on what her mission is. I've called for her to be fired. She said she won't step down.
Do you think she should resign?
Well, she won't resign, and it shouldn't be up to her, by the way. She doesn't work for herself. She works for the American people and ultimately at the pleasure of the President of the United States. I mean, Joe Biden has a record of not holding anybody accountable for failures. Go back and look at Afghanistan. 13 men and women killed who never should have died because of his failures and his top general's failures when every expert said they shouldn't have done it the way they did it. It was a completely planned withdrawal. They could have done it any way they wanted, and they did it in the worst way possible that put our men and women at risk, and we lost 13 people who never should have died, and no one was held accountable. Saturday, what happened Saturday should have never happened. You had people nearby pointing out to law enforcement, this kid's climbing on the roof. He's crawling up the roof, 20-year-old maneuvering the roof, and then the Secret Service director has the gall to say, well, gee whiz, it was a sloped roof. I mean, They were just walking around on that roof yesterday without any problem checking it out.
Yeah.
These are inexcusable answers. We have not gotten any real valid answers from her. I think she's in over her head. I think she needs to resign. This is a serious job. Your one job is to protect the president of the United States and the former presidents of the United States, and she failed. There are other people capable of doing that job. We need to bring them in right now.
We're going to take a short break now. When we come back, I'll have more with House Majority Leader Steve Scalise. We're talking about the Republican convention here in Milwaukee and the outlook for the election in November. Stay with us.
You're listening to Free Expression with Gerry Baker. Don't forget, you can listen to the latest episode anytime on your smart speaker. Just say, play the Opinion Free Expression podcast. Now, back to Gerry Baker.
I'm back with Steve Scalise, House Majority Leader. We're talking about the Republican convention here in Milwaukee and the future of the Republican Party, particularly given the pick of J.D. Vance as Donald Trump's vice presidential candidate this week. Does this reflect a new populist Republican Party? Donald Trump had a good range of candidates to choose from. We all know the names that were considered. He picked J.D. Vance, Senator J.D. Vance for Ohio. I think it's probably fair to say probably the most outspoken, articulate, maybe kind of the most famous, the most prominent exponent of the kind of populism in the Republican Party, conservative, national conservatism, identifying with issues and things that the Republican Party perhaps in the last 20 or 30 years has not been. Very much, pro-worker, to some extent pro-trade unions, very strongly in favor of tariffs, very, very strongly in favor of immigration restrictions. What do you think the pick of J.D. Vance signifies for the future of the Republican Party?
It shows you that President Trump wanted somebody who he was very comfortable with. There's a real strong rapport between the two of them. And I've been hearing that for months. So I wasn't surprised when he picked him, and we all know the names that were out there. A lot of great quality people to choose from, which is good to know that he could pick somebody that was going to be really good in that role. And if you look at JD and especially what he talked about last night, he's got an incredible life story. Here's a guy who lived the American dream, but shouldn't have. I mean, he came from a place where the odds were stacked against him, and yet he was able to achieve so many great things already in his life, let alone being on the verge of being elected the next vice president of the United States. So I think what he really relates to, and I've talked to a lot of my colleagues in the Midwest who are really, really excited about JD's pick because they say it helps them because the way he relates to, like you said, blue collar workers. And by the way, this is the old Reagan coalition, that we lost. Reagan built this incredible coalition, won 49 states when he won his election because he appealed to blue collar workers. He was a great president, but he appealed to some people that Republicans just weren't appealing to. And then over time that fractured and they went away, and no party was really talking to them until Donald Trump came along in 2016. And so JD has a similar kind of appeal to a lot of those blue collar workers. And you think about a state like Michigan, and believe me, JD mentioned them a few times as an Ohio State grad. He said, don't worry, Michigan, I still care about you. But, Wisconsin, 50-50 state, Michigan, we're ahead by a few points in Michigan. You look at a state like Minnesota. We haven't won Minnesota in 50 years. The only state Reagan didn't win is in play right now. By most polling 50-50. J.D. Vance helps in states like that, Pennsylvania, a lot of blue collar workers that love the message and the story of J.D. Vance's life. And so, for those people that feel like Washington has left them behind, the forgotten men and women, Donald Trump really surged because of those types of voters that a lot of people on the left still don't understand. They don't understand Donald Trump's appeal and why those people relate to him because they used to be part of the Democrat coalition. They're now firmly in the Republican fold, and I think JD helps solidify that.
He's been, again, one of the most outspoken critics of U.S. aid to Ukraine. You've been supportive of U.S. aid to Ukraine, although you've been critical of some scrutiny of it. What's striking, I thought, in his speech on Wednesday night, that J.D. Vance didn't mention Ukraine directly by aid. He talked about America's commitments overseas and everything. Do you think that the combination of a Trump-Vance administration means the end of U.S. support for Ukraine?
I don't think it means the end of support. I think it does mean the end of Putin's just carte blanche in Eastern Europe. If you look when Obama became president, you saw a change in foreign policy and kind of this idea that he started apologizing for American strength. And by the way, and I talk to world leaders a lot, they don't want America to be weak. They don't want America to be average. They want a strong America. And so when you had a president exhibiting this kind of weakness, apologetic attitude, the bad guys listen to that. China hears that. Russia hears it. Iran hears it, and they take advantage. And then Trump came in with a very different agenda. I talked to NATO allies when Trump Trump came in and they were scared to death. They thought he was going to get out of NATO. And I talked to Trump about this. He never wanted to get out of NATO. He just wanted them to pay their fair share. What's wrong with that? The commitment was every country pays 2% of their GDP. And most countries were well below 0.5%. And then America was picking up the rest of the tab. And what we've seen, I mean, I was in Poland not long ago. They're bragging that they're over 2% of GDP now. So countries have picked up the pace in Europe because they recognize how important it is for them to contribute to NATO. But Trump's attitude was also to be tough against the bad guys. That's what's missing right now. That's why Putin was able to come back in and not just go to Crimea like he did under Obama, but to actually run roughshod under Biden and go into every part of Ukraine that he wanted. And Biden's response has been so delayed and so weak. Same thing with Israel. Israel's under attack, our greatest ally in the Middle East. And right now, Biden's posture is to basically try to equivocate Hamas and Israel. There is no equivocation. Hamas, it came in, invaded Israel. I mean, brutally murdered people, including Americans, still to this day holding American hostages. And Biden's trying to treat it as if the two are on the same page and both need to stop when there's still American hostages being held by Hamas. He won't even insist they get released. That weakness hurts America. It hurts our allies. So Trump coming back in, believe me, the bad guys in the world do not want a Trump presidency, but it's going to help our allies around the world. And I think it brings a stability that's so needed around the globe.
You say the party's united, and it certainly seems that way when you're in the convention hall here in Milwaukee. But I have to say, I've had a lot of conversations with a number of, let's say, conservatives, traditional conservatives, Reagan-type conservatives, including fellow members of Congress of yours, who have expressed a lot of reservations about J.D. Vance and about what his pick means for the party, and particularly on, the issues that they care about, reducing taxes, reducing corporate taxes, reducing the burden of regulation on businesses, favoring free trade. They worry that, look, he's the vice president. As we know, the vice president ultimately doesn't have say over these things, but they worry that this signals that there's going to be much more resistance to the conservative agenda that they would like to see a Republican president and a Republican Congress implement next year. Is that concern about the direction of the party and the new Republican Party, the new populist Republican Party that it represents, is that justified, that concern? I mean, is this going to be a party that now openly embraces more regulation, openly embraces pro-worker policies? What do you think?
No, and I don't share those concerns because we have a roadmap. The good thing about President Trump running, even with all the demonization you see out of the Biden camp and, oh my God, the world's going to end, democracy is going to end. Well, hold on a second. This isn't some new person that's coming on the political scene. Donald Trump was actually president of the United States for 4 years. You can go look and see what happened when Donald Trump was president last time. And I was there. I was the majority whip helping pass a lot of those great policies. You just talked about some great things, important things. What is the position going to be on taxes, on regulations? Those are critically important. Well, instead of wondering what it's going to be like, you don't have to speculate. You can say, what did Donald Trump do last time? I don't think there was any president I've seen. I didn't serve when Ronald Reagan was president. I love Reagan, just what he did for our country. But Donald Trump did more to get regulations under control than any president I've seen in my lifetime. And by the way, that's a major statement because it helped to get our economy moving again. Nobody did more on tax cuts than Donald Trump. And it wasn't just on the personal side. It was personal and corporate. He didn't target corporations. He wanted to go even lower than 21%. We were at a 35% corporate rate, and we were the most uncompetitive nation in the world. We were losing great companies. And the Wall Street Journal covered a lot of this. I mean, you can go down the list. One day we should probably make a list with the logos of everybody in America would recognize the logos of all these famous companies who moved out of America because we just weren't competitive. And everybody complained about it. Donald Trump was the first person to say, we're going to do something about it. And we went down to 21% corporate rate in a very short period of time within a year of his presidency. And it had immediate impact. And he wants to go lower. Look, he wanted to go to 15. He wants to get rid of, other taxes. We've got budget reconciliation limitations. I've been working with President Trump, by the way, for the last few months. Anybody that worries about what might happen, I've been having a lot of detailed conversations with President Trump about what that first 100 days would look like if we get the House, Senate, and President Trump back in the White House, what we could do to put solid tax policy in place, regulatory policy in place, a secure border, which all of us want, by the way. All of those things can happen in the first 100 days, and President Trump wants to do that. And again, these are all things he did before. He hasn't changed in terms of the things he wants for this country and for workers. Look, what's good for business is good for workers. That's what President Trump has always been about. And so you're not seeing a different approach from President Trump towards the business community. Believe me, the business community is clamoring for President Trump to come back, because what they've seen is an all-out assault on American industry from Joe Biden's agencies. I mean, you go down the line, and American energy, we've been talking about that a lot. You can't produce American energy right now. Good luck getting a permit to do anything, whatever industry you're in right now under Biden. Trump wants to free that up. He wants fair regulations again, get rid of all these radical mandates and regulations. And y'all cover all this. You write about all this stuff. Trump wants to get rid of this too.
Congressman, you talked about the disarray in the Democratic Party. No one would disagree that there is total disarray right at the moment right there. It changes by the day, but it's looking increasingly likely that maybe Joe Biden will step down and they will have a new candidate.
I hope not.
Well, there you are. You've answered my question.
We might need to go to Chicago and offer up ourselves as super delegates, because they can't trust anybody on their own side to support the guy that 14 million people went to the polls to vote for. Where is their talk of democracy? Democrat voters chose Joe Biden to be their nominee, and then they're going to go in a smoke-filled room in Chicago, Illinois, and throw those votes in the trash can and pick somebody else? I mean, how un-American would that be?
Sounds like you're worried, though, that maybe does Gretchen Whitmer worry you? Does, Josh Shapiro, Pennsylvania, worry you?
They've got some of the nuttiest far-left people you've ever seen. Their utopian dream is Gavin Newsom, who's destroyed a state with probably the most natural resources of any state in America, and he literally destroyed it to the point where they're losing 1 million people a year. They can't keep any business. Elon Musk just announced yesterday he's moving SpaceX out of California because it's so radically crazy. Let that be their standard bearer. But then what do they do with Kamala? This is their problem. They say they want to get rid of Joe Biden, and then nobody was saying they wanted Kamala because nobody on the Democrat side likes her. And then Kamala raised her hand and said, hold on a second, remember me, I'm the vice president and I'm not going away either. And then they realized they have a Kamala problem. They can't get rid of her. So if Joe goes away, Kamala's the president. Kamala's their choice for president. And they're not excited about that either. So they're in a box.
It sounds like you like the idea of running against Kamala Harris for president.
I like the idea of a united Republican Party behind Donald Trump while you just, pop the popcorn and watch them implode, because at the end of the day, the reason they're really imploding is because the American people walked away from their party because they've gone nuts. You don't recognize the Democrat Party of today. Blue dogs of 20 years ago are Republicans today because the Democrats have aligned with the far left socialists. Nobody recognizes their party because they're so extreme. Progressives. What is a progressive? It's somebody who wants to tell you have to buy an electric car when you don't want to, that you have to buy a gas stove when you like. Who are these people? People are fed up with that. So I think, look, let them stay in disarray and try to figure out in a smoke-filled room in Chicago who they're going to try to sell to the American people. It's their ideas that the American people are rejecting. It's not Joe Biden, because everybody knows Joe Biden's not making the decisions anyway. So at the end of the day, they can repackage their bad ideas all they want, but it's still horrible ideas for American families. They're paying too much at the grocery store. They're paying too much at the gas pump. They hate the idea that 8+ million people have come across our border illegally, and Joe Biden doesn't want to change any of it, but neither do anybody else that would come behind Joe Biden. That's what Donald Trump is showing a different alternative for.
And just pure speculation, do you think they are going to dump Biden?
In the end, I don't, because unless Joe Biden walks away, he still holds all the cards. They can want to get rid of him all they want. Number one, Joe Biden holds not only all the cards, there's over $100 million in his account that just evaporates if he walks away by being thrown out. But then if he goes, who comes behind him? It's Kamala. They don't like Kamala. The American people, her numbers are horrible there. But at the end of the day, let them fight amongst themselves. But Joe Biden was chosen by their voters to be the nominee. Donald Trump was ours. And by the way, we're proud to have Donald Trump as our nominee. They are in disarray because people don't like their ideas, and they're going to try to dump that off on Joe Biden. They can't look in the mirror and admit their ideas failed the American people. And that's why they're going to lose in November.
Majority Leader Steve Scalise, thanks very much indeed for joining Free Expression, and enjoy the rest of your week and the rest of your summer.
Hey, great being with you. God bless.
That's it for this week's episode. I'm taking a short vacation for the next week or so, but we'll still have something for you in the Free Expression slot. Please do tune in. In the meantime, have a great summer, and I'll be back with you in August.